holistic and functional medicine much before it became popular. He developed his unique approach to individual health and global health called Unplugged medicine. He wrote the first book on the applications of the microbiome for chronic disease and wellness. Most important to Dr. Kellman is incorporation of the Torah to every facet of life, including to the Torah approach to medicine and the role and place for Emunah, faith. He studied yeshiva for many years, including Yeshiva University and the Hesed Yeshiva Gush Etzion. Most important to Dr. Kellman is his learning for 13 years with a great tzaddik and teacher of the inner Torah, the Zohar, the Arizal. Now he hosts this program, Torah Unplugged.
All right.
And now your host, Dr. Raphael Kellman, who you can always reach him at 1-833-MD, help me.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Zev, am I on here?
You're on, let's put on your video camera. And
the video, all right.
Hey, we're live on YouTube as well, not on the radio, also Danny W, HD3, as well as live on YouTube in a very, very special broadcast tonight. And the very special
guest.
Do
the video now? Do you have the video now?
I don't see you yet, so you have to just put on your camera, and we will see you, and all the people on the YouTube land can watch you as well. You had your camera on before, so you just got to put on the camera, and it will be demystified.
All right. Here we go.
Okay.
Now we're on, right?
Do not have your camera on, so maybe go out and come back in again. And I'll just tell our audience that you can always reach Dr. Kellman. He has a wonderful number, and you can speak to him about medical. Oh, now I can see him. 833-MD, help me. Dr. Kellman, just face the camera.
Yes.
Perfect. Take it away. Got very special.
All right.
Special guest.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Judaism Unplugged, which we're going to change the name, but for now, that's been the name, and we're going to continue until we come up with a new name. But anyway, look, tonight we have a very, very special guest. It's Rabbi Kessin, Rabbi Mendel Kessin. Many of you are listening probably know who he is. If not, you should know who he is. I've known Rabbi Kessin for many, many, many years. And it's really been an extraordinary opportunity to have met him and to still be in communication with him and to listen to some of his YouTubes and his channels of incredible Torah. Very unique rabbi. You're not going to find anyone like him anywhere. And he's very, very unique. Not only because he's a big Talmid Chacham, but that's not what's really ultimately important. What's most important is his incredible depth of understanding the Ramchal and Kabbalah, but most important, how he applies it to practical life, and also to be able to understand what's happening in our lives, what's happening personal lives, what's happening in our collective experience, what's happening in the news and in the way the world is moving and developing.
So
and where are we going from here? So this is Rabbi Kessin.
Before you just move your camera so people can see you're upside down on the camera. So I know we demystify what's going on. So, but
am I still upside down? Well, maybe I feel upside down. Hold on a second.
You had it before. We want to make sure people see you crystal clear, because
I know now that we're doing the. Is it any better now?
No, we have to just make one more rotation. Stop. Now you're good. Now you're perfect.
Okay.
Now
well,
people can see you. Okay.
We're a little technologically challenged here. Okay. So anyway, with no further ado, this is Rabbi Kessin, and Rabbi Kessin, thank you so much for being on. You hear me? Okay? Is everything
Yes.
clear?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's really a pleasure. So we've had many conversations. Recently, we've had an incredible conversation. It was for an hour and a half. And tonight, I want to talk about Jewish education, the need to transform it, especially nowadays. Something shifted on October 7th. Some shifted in the consciousness of the Jew, our individual and collective consciousness. Of course, it will take some time till it becomes we're more aware of it, but something shifted. Of course, it was beginning before, but something major happened, perhaps you could say a quantum jump. And this transformation that is evolving, and hopefully it will accelerate, relates both to education, Jewish education, how it needs to change, and also modern Judaism. How should that change? And that's why you're on the show, Rabbi Kessin. So take it away. Tell us.
Well, I'm going to say things which are, in many ways, I wouldn't use the word controversial, but certainly different than what many people think. And what I'd like to do is talk about a specific problem and detail it, why it exists and what the remedy is, because it affects the Jewish people. And although it's very broad, it can obviously be continued far more than the hour itself. But at least I will cover a specific, niche in this problem. And the problem is that, when you take a look at educational institutions, and there's a reason why I want to compare it. If you think about it, what are the goals of education? What are the educational objectives? Well, what it is there are 5 objectives in education. There are really more, but I'm not going into the other areas of human growth and so on. But there are 5 basic objectives. One is to learn. We have to engage in the activity called learning. So that's an objective, to have people learning. And I'm referring specifically to Torah education, not secular education. So in Torah education, right, we want to create a situation where people can have the wherewithal to learn. First objective. Second objective is not just learning, but you have to know what you learned. Knowing what you learned is more than just learning. It requires specific activities that will enable you to know the knowledge. So that's the second objective. Third objective of education, chinuch, is mastery. That's right. It's not enough to know. You have to master the material. And we see that because where's the mitzvah of what's called learning Torah? And the answer is Kriyas Shema. It says, "V'chinantem levanecho," and you will teach them, they translate it, diligently. So there's a Gemara in Masechta Kiddushin that asks, well, what does that mean to teach people, students, children, diligently? So the Gemara says, "Sheyehei mechudodim b'sicho," that they should be sharp in your mouth. What does that mean, sharp in your mouth? So Rashi explains at that place, and he says that if somebody walks over to you and asks you a question or an understanding of a certain area of Torah, you should immediately spit it out. That's called mastery. So what do we see? That the mitzvah of Torah learning is not merely learning and knowing. You have to know at the level of mastery. Fourth objective, well, you have to retain. You have to remember what you learned. That is a specific goal that requires other types of activities, chazorah and so on, review and so on. And then the fifth ideal or objective is application. Well, you have to know how to apply that which you know and mastered and retained. You want to know how to apply it in terms of behaviorally. So there you are. These are the 5 goals of education. Now, if you think about it, all of them are required, okay? Especially this is what's called the tzivui. This is the commandment of God. But when you take a look at the educational system that is prevalent today, you find that most people really do not retain. They don't remember what they learned, you see. In other words, most education institutions are involved in learning, but they don't do the proper ideas in terms of knowing. They don't. I think you have to, whoever's talking, therefore, they don't do the proper things of knowing, certainly mastery. So the question is why? Now, what's interesting, which is a very interesting comparison, and I realize people will have objection to this comparison, but like it says in Chazal, if they tell you there's Torah b'goyim, right, then al-tamen, do not believe it. But if they tell you Chochmah b'goyim, that there is wisdom among the non-Jews, right, then believe it.
Right.
Therefore, the concept of wisdom can also obviously apply to non-Jews. It's not just Jewish people that have wisdom, and so on. When without going into the, all the philosophers of the secular world and so on. Well, let's take a look. And like I say, it's important to see what they do as some type of comparison. Now, you'll notice that if you go to college or university, basically you go for an education. Now, I'm not talking about the liberal colleges. In many ways, it's basically what, people think that it's required, but a lot of it is a waste of time and so on. But without getting into that, but for instance, let's say you want to be an engineer and you go to college, right? You can become basically an engineer, get certified in 5 years. Now, there's an enormous amount of what? Of mathematics and physics in engineering and so on. How do they do it? How does a guy become a professional? Certainly with the ability of having a degree, or they have a proficiency, because they have to get certified, they have to get a degree, right? A license. Also, they can't get a job. How do they come out knowing? And it's not just learning, because they are subjected to tests. So the question is, how do they do it? And it's not just engineering, it's all the professions. How do they become an MD in 7 years? Or a CPA in 2? Or a lawyer in 3? Now, I'm not saying they become, experts, no. But they have to know a minimum amount of the ideas in that field, or else they cannot in any way be a professional, because they can't get a job. So the question is, how do they make a professional, basically, in 5 years? Now, you take a look at the yeshiva system, if that's really what it is, and so on. And a guy after 5 years, what does he know? What does he remember? You see, hardly anything. So the question is, why? How is that possible? Now, there are people that want to say, and I'm going to show you why this is a fallacy, well, Torah is infinite. And obviously, you cannot know something infinite in 5 years. Whereas engineering, let's say, is not infinite. Okay? Anyway, that's their argument. That's a tremendous fallacy. Why? Because there are 2 types of infinities. One is an absolute infinity, of which Torah is, and then there's a relative infinity. You see, engineering is relatively infinite. Why? Medicine. Let's take medicine. Now, medicine, of course, is not absolutely infinite. It's relatively infinite, because it would take you many lifetimes to read all the medical textbooks and journals. There are thousands and thousands of journals. You cannot even do this. That today you cannot, it's basically very difficult to be a generalist, right? There's so much information out there that you can barely become a specialist in a specialty.
Right.
So therefore the question is, it's not absolutely infinite, but anything that takes more than one lifetime, as far as we're concerned, is infinite.
Right.
Even if it's not absolutely infinite. So the question is, they have to produce a professional, but they can't take it. They can't take 80 years to do that.
Right.
They have to do it in a relatively short amount of time. 4 years, 3 years, 6 years, 7 years. So that's the question. It's interesting that nobody seems to ask that. What is the secret? And that's very important for us to understand. How do all the colleges and universities produce professionals in a highly specialized field in a short amount of time, where they must know it and master it, or they can't get a degree? They can't get a job. And I'm going to answer that question, because their approach to the acquisition of chokhmah, of wisdom, is very different. Now, the truth is that what I'm about to say will seem to be, in many ways, radical, but it's not, because this is done in every university and college in the world. So here's the problem. One of the difficulties of Torah is that it really lacks a textbook. It doesn't have an adequate textbook that you can really use. What does that mean? In college, everybody has a textbook. If you start engineering 101, right? So you have a textbook that has beginning information, even if the textbook is 1,000 pages, but it's
Right.
all meant to give you a beginning structure. Then you go, engineering 102 or engineering 202. Each level has a textbook, and that's how they're able to read, understand, and acquire the information. When you look at Judaism, Judaism doesn't really have a textbook that's in many ways adequate. What does that mean? Well, let's take a Gemara. Okay. Of course, Gemara is a foundational textbook, but it's not meant for beginners. What is the essence of Gemara? Gemara is a collection of what's called sugyas. Okay. Now, people translate a sugya as a topic, which it's not really, but it's certainly an area of discussion. What is a sugya in Gemara? A sugya in Gemara is a problem-solving format. It takes a problem, for instance, there's a contradiction, right? Or who is the author, and so on. It attempts to solve them. How? By shaklavatalia, which means debate, okay? And then it offers a resolution. That is what's called a problem-solving format. The essential function of Gemara really is not only to give you yediyos, which is facts, information. In fact, its essential idea is to solve problems. That's why Rav Ashi wrote the Gemara in that format. You see, if he wanted to give you just information and not problem-solving format, how the Torah goes about solving a problem, right? Then he could have written it like a Rambam, which is a Mishnah Torah, which is basically, a compendium that brings down facts. It does not have the questions. It doesn't even have the debates. It has the resolutions of every maskana, which is conclusion of Shas. So Rav Ashi would have written a Rambam, but he didn't, because he wanted to show you the Talmudic reasoning process. So he wrote the information of Torah, right, as a problem-solving format. But the problem is this, that a problem-solving format, in many ways, is not adequate for a beginner or even for a development of mastering the oral law, because you don't want to know first problems. You don't want to know advanced material, because the Gemara is advanced. It will take a specific fragment and try to solve it. But what you need to do is acquire a massive database first. You're a beginner or whatever. You need to know facts. You want to know solving a problem? That's later on in graduate school. When you read journals are concerned with problem solving. You see? But initially, the educational process is you have to have your DOE facts. You see? And then you climb the ladder. Teaching or mastering is a ladder, and it has rungs. And the first rung is not Gemara. Now, what I'm saying, is this rabbinically, known? Of course. There are many Gemaras. The classic one is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Perek Hey, I think it's Mishnah Chof Aleph, that says the following: Ben Chomish Mikra, 5 years old is to know well the Mikra, which is the Tanakh, right? Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksubim. And then 10 years old, Ben Esther the Mishnah, 10 years old to know the Mishnayos. And then Chamesh Esrei, 15 years old to know the Gemara. Now, that is not merely a segula or some good advice. No, this is the educational process. First, you have to master a database of basic information, because you need a basis, you see. And then later on, you could begin to delve into the advanced aspect of the database. You see, in fact, what's interesting, if you think about it, what is the basis? And this would be great as an educational system without going into how. But in any case, imagine, what is the basis of every single halacha in Torah? And the answer is the Taryag. The 613 commandments is the basis of every single halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Where are the details of the Taryag? Where are the details of the biblical commandments, 613? And the answer, that's the Mishnayos. Where are the problems of the Taryag? Where are the problems of the 613 commandments? And the answer is Gemara. And then where are the applications, right, of the solutions to these problems? And the answer is Shulchan Aruch. Isn't that interesting? You have a ladder here. You have Tanakh, you have Mishnayos, then you have Gemara, Shas, Bavli and Shalmi, and then you have what's called Shulchan Aruch. But it's not taught that way. You see, what we begin to realize is Gemara, which is critical and necessary, is inadequately to be taught to a 10-year-old kid. Because that's when kids begin to learn Gemara, in the 5th grade, which 10 years old. How could a kid who knows nothing, who doesn't even know how to think legally, or he doesn't know how to analyze debate, and it's in a foreign language, Gemara, Aramaic, how can he learn at 10 years old? It doesn't make any sense.
So at what age should kids start learning Gemara? What do you think?
It's not a matter of age, it's a matter of preparation. I don't care how old you are. Even if you understood the Gemara, you can never master it. You can never have a comprehension of Gemara.
Nowadays, already in yeshiva, modern Orthodox yeshiva is already in 6th grade, 7th grade. Well, certainly 7th and 8th grade. They're learning a lot of Gemara. Certainly in high school, and not just the boys, the girls too. It's definitely a trend, a big change. Is that girls are now learning Gemara as well. I think at the same level, or maybe, yeah, absolutely at the same level. And I believe it's starting 6th or 7th grade. So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, that's a mistake. Imagine if I want to become a cardiologist, right? So I don't want to go to undergraduate. It costs too much money, too much time, whatever, right? So what I do is I'll read the journals. I go to a medical library and read journal articles on cardiology. That's the same thing as learning Gemara. It's an advanced approach to halachic topics. That's not how you become a doctor. You need to start from medical school, from the beginning. You need to learn anatomy, physiology.
If you're constructing a new school, a new yeshiva, a new approach to Jewish education, what would it look like? You would be learning.
Well, if I was,
you were starting a whole new revolution, a whole new approach to Torah teaching. What would happen? What would it look like?
Well, I would start. I would start by respecting the human mind, and that's what they violate. The mind does not want to see Gemara first, because first of all, like I said, it's advanced. You have no preparation. The second problem is it's fragmented. The Gemara is fragmented. You see, it requires a massive database to even understand what in the world is going on. And then Gemara is scattered. They would
start at one Masech at a time. Let's say they're studying Brachos or
90%.
Bava Kama, a lot of.
But 90% of a Gemara is the debate. That's why nobody remembers anything. They don't remember the facts. You don't remember the debate, the individual give and take of what goes on to solve the problem. Gemara is not the textbook for beginners. It's that simple. There's no educational system in the world that starts with graduate school.
So when do you think they should start teaching Gemara in yeshiva?
I will tell you, it's not a matter of when. It's a matter of what's your preparation. What is the preparation for Gemara? And the answer is Mishnayos. Why Mishnayos? Because Mishnayos is the oral law. It talks about the facts, the halachas. It will give you the database. That's what you need first. Now, if you learn, there's 4,192 Mishnahs. If you learn all those Mishnayos, if you learn 4 Mishnayos a day, you'll finish the entire oral law, which, by the way, is over 100 1,000 facts. You can finish it in 3 years. So could you
So,
imagine?
so let's say when should they start teaching Mishnah in yeshivas today?
They should start when they normally start. First, they teach them Tanakh, which is fine. And then they start, I think it's about 8 years old, or 7 or 8 or whatever. They should start teaching them Mishnayot. There are
Until
yeshivas.
what grade? Until what grade should they then go to another level or another teaching? Many years should they be focused on
Well, let me
Mishnayos?
tell you something. There was a Gadol B'Yisrael. His name was Yehuda Zev Gustman, very well known. When he was 21 years old, he was on the court or the Bezdin, Rab Chaim Oizer Grudzensky. It was phenomenal. And Rab Chaim Oizer Grudzensky in pre-war Europe, right, was a Gadol Hador. And this guy was 21 years old. And he was on his Bezdin, right? How did he do it? So he writes in his biography that when he went to yeshiva at 10 years old, his menayel in Europe would not allow anybody to learn Gemara unless they learned the entire Shita Sidrei Mishnah, which is the 6 orders of the Mishnah. So he writes about himself that when he was 10 years old, he knew the entire Mishnayos by heart. And he was able to therefore finish Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, right? And 2,711 pages. He finished it by the time he was 16.
But he's an exception. Obviously,
time.
he's an exception. But for the average child today, what should be the plan? 6th grade, 5th grade, they start Mishnayos, and then when
the plan should be minimally, if you begin Gemara, you want to learn it, fine. So learn one seder of Gemara. But the problem is that's all they learn is Gemara all day long. There's no recognition that you need to have a seder, which is a session dedicated to knowledge, to facts, Yediyah. And that's what Mishnayos is. So the way to do it is to learn Mishnayos, what's called Be'iyun, to learn it in depth. And I don't mean pilpul, lumdis. I mean to understand the actual factual information well and be able to know it by heart. Look,
so it could be practical. So would you say what grade should they start learning a little Gemara? Should it be 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, college? What do you suggest?
Well, what I'm trying to say, it's not so much when, it's what's your preparation for Gemara. That's what the whole Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says. You need to have Tanakh at 5, Mishnayos at 10, and then Gemara. So there's 2 issues here. Developmentally, you have to be ready. So what you're asking me is developmentally. What you're asking me is developmentally, when can a guy understand the give and take of a Gemara?
So I would
say probably about 13.
Okay.
But if he mastered the oral law to Mishnayos, it would be an incredible advance. Unbelievable advance.
But no, that will take a lot of time to be
No, it doesn't. If you learn 4 Mishnahs a day, you will finish the entire oral law, Be'iyun, in 3 years. Right?
Yeah, but you can't expect that for 7th, 8th graders.
Why not? Why not? They're much more sophisticated than we can imagine. These guys can run rings around adults in terms of computers or many other things.
And what about once they start studying Gemara in, let's say, 9th grade, 10th grade? How much time should be allocated to the study of Gemara once they're in that?
Well, what I would say, I would say the following. Let them learn the entire Mishnayos of the Masechta of whatever Gemara they want to learn. So at least, for instance, if they want to learn Bava Kama, which is about damages, right? Let them learn the totality of Masechta Bava Kama in terms of the Mishnayos. So then they see the scope of what is damage and what does the Torah say about the mazikim, the things that do damage, what a nezik is, what is damage, what are the conditions of damage, what are the conditions of payment, etc. Let them learn the Masechta, Mishnayos of that Masechta. Then let them learn the Masechta. What a difference. Meanwhile, a guy learns, a Masechta Bava Kama. He has no idea what the concept is of damages. He's already involved in lumdus, in depth, in analysis. What's he doing in lumdus?
Now, let me
You
ask you a
see?
question, because this is something we've spoken about, and you give so many shiurim on the Ramchal and on the Hashkafa and the Zohar, even, of course, and that's a major focus, and also the Chafetz Chaim, the Shmiras Haloshon, so much that you teach and speak about that's not taught in
Right.
the average yeshiva. So tell us about that component of Torah learning, what that represents, because you rightfully so you say that there's two components. There's one, knowledge of Torah, but then there's something bigger than that. And so let's talk about that component. Like, what do you think is missing in terms of Jewish education? First of all, let me just sum up everything that you said. Tell me if I'm getting it right. One is, you're saying the whole derech needs to change in order to be able to really download not just the information, but the concepts and the deeper meaning of what all these laws are really about. And much more time to be on Mishnayos, and we're jumping much too quick to Gemara. Exactly what age we move along this process, that's something that could be discussed, but certainly the basic curriculum would be very different in a yeshiva that you think would be more progressive. And I think you feel that there's too much of a focus on Daf Yomi in general, because it's too much preoccupation with right to the study of Gemara, and there's some more basic things that should be learned first in order to be able to really understand the information. And then the major part of your contribution is the necessity to start studying Hashkafa and to understand the Torah from the big picture. So could you tell us more about that? Because I took so many of your classes and I've learned with you and I follow you. We talk a lot. So tell us more about that and how that could start changing Jewish education and Judaism in general.
Well, here's what I would do. If I opened the yeshiva, so the first thing, which is basically what they don't do, you need to learn the language. Most people go to yeshiva, they don't know Hebrew. And I'm not talking about modern Hebrew. I'm talking about there are four types of Hebrew. I should say in how it developed. There's biblical Hebrew, there's Mishnaic Hebrew, there's medieval Hebrew, and then there's modern Hebrew. Most people don't have a clue in terms of the language. So the amazing thing is, how can you focus on a text that's all written in Hebrew and Aramaic, and you don't even know the language? That itself holds up so many people in terms of grasping the real ideas. So I would certainly have some type of seder, something of teaching linguistics, language.
Okay.
That's number one.
Absolutely. Now, what would be number two?
Number two, critical thinking skills. Most people don't know how to think. I realize that it's an astounding statement, but thinking is a property of the human mind.
And how do you teach thinking? How do you teach thinking?
Well, first,
Go
there are
ahead.
two basic processes in thinking. One is to analyze, which is to learn how to break down information, how to define, how to understand what a concept is, what its definitions are. Okay, that's analysis. The second process of thinking is synthesis. How do I put everything together? In fact, it's interesting that the human mind only wants to know two things about anything. One, what is this? That's a definition. That's analysis. And the second thing is, how does it relate to everything else? You see, once it has those two parts of information, then it understands what it's thinking about. So that's the concept of critical thinking. People are not taught how to think. So they make all kinds of mistakes, fallacies, that's what they call in thinking. So I would teach how to think. What is the definition? Okay, when you learn a sugya, for instance, how do we define, a chazaka? People don't understand how to define. So they have these vague understandings of legal or halachic terms. So that's the second aspect of curriculum. Third aspect of curriculum is database. Let me tell you something. Taryag mitzvah. there are 613 commandments. Okay, most people have no idea what they are. But if you think about it, 613 commandments is the totality of the entire Torah. Imagine as a young kid, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, what happens if you learned the Taryag, all 613 mitzvahs, based on the order of the Rambam, because he organizes them topically, but you picked out 10 ideas in each mitzvah that basically form the basis of that mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? When does it apply? How does it apply? Where does it apply? Etc. Right? You would know 6,130 facts about the entire law, the entire Torah. Why can't that be taught in yeshiva at 6 years old? Imagine what a person would know just from that. So that's the first.
That's certainly a lot. I mean, but why
Well,
not? I mean, that's a great goal. But I absolutely.
Well, let me continue. The second aspect is Mishnayos. I would teach Mishnayos be'iyun, which means to understand each Masechta, to understand the central idea of each Masechta, and then to organize the halachas in each Masechta with the Mishnayos. Now, it used to be that it was very difficult to do, but there are many sforim that have come out lately in Mishnayos, which fill in all the missing information. Art Scroll, for instance, has 3 editions of Mishnayos, and one of the best ones is the Elucidated, where they explain basically. Yeah, so imagine if you went through all sheets of Sidrei Mishnah, right, 63 tractates, and you did it with the Elucidated. Do you have any idea what you would know? Phenomenal. So why can't a Seder or 2 hours or whatever be devoted to giving you that incredible database? Because that's 40% of Shas. Do you know that that's 40% of Shas?
No, your methodology of education and teaching is obviously very different than what's certainly conventional. But what I want to add, because I think it's very, very fascinating, is all the other, in addition to this, you're radical also in the other aspects of teaching of Jewish education that you feel should be taught.
Which I was going to get to, right.
So let's get to that part.
Okay,
Hashkafa,
now another
Ramchal and the Zohar.
Well, let me, right. So in learning about halachas, there are 3 areas of halachas. 1, what is the law? Number 1. Number 2, how does this law fit in the divine agenda? Most people have no concept of Hashkafa. Hashkafa is machshava. I hate to use the word Jewish philosophy because it's not really that, but it's Jewish knowledge of Hashkafa. I mean, the classic sefer is Derech Hashem, the Way of God, written by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Most people have no idea of why did God create the world? Who is God? Why are they Jews? Why are they Goyim? What is the path that Jews have to do? What's the purpose of creation? Why bother altogether? You see, why do we need a Messiah? Who is the Mashiach? What's the process? Not only that, why are there of us? Why is it there was no Jew for 2,000 years until Avram Avinu, when the whole point of the Bria was that there should be Jews? There's so many questions that most never get answered. That's Hashkafa. And I'll tell you something. Maybe in the past, you didn't have to know as much Hashkafa because if you lived in a ghetto, you lived among Jews, so you're not confronted with foreign ideologies. Today, every Tom, Dick, and Harry has his own philosophy, his own Hashkafa. There's an enormous amount of variance in belief. So don't you think a person should know about his religion, the fundamental aspects? That is the study of Hashkafa. Not only that, where do you know to love God? How do you love God? How do you fear God? A great deal of the motive to engage in the emotional connection that you have with God is by knowing who He is, what He is, and what your mission is. People don't know anything about that. So where are you going to come for the love? The problem in many ways is that Judaism has become a ritual religion. I mean, it's classic. Whatever happened to the spirituality of Judaism? What does spirituality mean? It means realizing that we are not material, that we are really essentially, and not only at the end of the entire existence is Ruchnius, is another universe called Olam Haba or whatever. That's spirituality, you see? So where are you going to get it from if you don't understand Hashkafa, which is all about the divine agenda and all the ideas,
tell us,
you see?
Okay,
That's
so now
number
when you
two.
say, yeah,
That's
tell me,
number
like,
two.
when you say the love of Hashem, the love of God, understanding what is the purpose of Judaism, purpose of the creation, the purpose of the Jew, the purpose of the non-Jew, and the direction that the world is going. So what would you teach, and how would you categorize it? What would you teach children in schools, 6th grade, 5th
what I
grade,
would
7th grade,
teach,
8th grade, high
I would
school?
teach the topic of Hashkafa using the Ramchal, because the
And
Ramchal is
what's
highly
included?
organized. What?
Okay, so like what's included? What does the Ramchal talk about? What's the Ramchal's objective? And how could that be now applied to Jewish education and also to reshaping, reformulating Judaism in general?
The essence of Judaism is a divine plan that has everything in it. The divine plan is called the blueprint of the Bria, and that answers all questions. And that's fundamental. Look, we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that God is one. And because of that, we say V'yohavta Hashem Elokecha. Love comes from knowing who God is. What does He want from me? How does He help me? Where's the chesed, the kindness, and the mercy? Without knowing the divine plan, what are you going to do? Where are you going to get the emotions from? You see, if you look at the Mesilas Yesharim, which is the classic sefer on what's called Tikkun Hamidus, how do you develop character traits? Why would anybody be motivated to do this? Actually, the Mesilas Yesharim is not even about Midas, about character traits. It's about avodah. What is the service? What are you supposed to look like at the end of the sefer? Dvekus, and so on.
And you mentioned the word motivates.
Right.
What would motivate people to be even interested in it? And so what does motivate?
Look, if you think about it, unless the guy is completely immersed in physicality, and they are, people don't realize the beauty of spirituality, and that spirituality is described and spelled out in many vital svarim. Like I say, the Mesilas Yesharim or many svarim, describes exactly what your purpose is. Look, everybody in the end wants to know what's the meaning of life. Well, Judaism has the entire answer in terms of Hashkafa. Once you have the Hashkafa, right, then automatically you're motivated. It gives you meaning, understanding of what in the world you're supposed to be. Now,
in a nutshell, what is the Hashkafa? Like, if you could say in 60 seconds, what is this Hashkafa that you're talking about that is so important to know, that will lead to Avas Hashem, that will motivate you to want to be part of such a great religion?
Okay, for that, you have to ask yourself, what is the essence of Torah? Or what is the essence of the God-assigned mission? And the answer is what God wants you to realize. And I'm going to give you the gist, as they say, of the entire essence of what's called the Avodah. This is what God wants. He wants you to realize that there's another reality besides the physical. It's a reality called other world. And that's treated in Kabbalah and so on. But it's also treated in Hashkafa. He wants you to recognize, like I said, there is another reality. You see, and in order to not only to recognize there is another reality, but to behave in accordance with that reality, and that's the mitzvahs. People don't understand what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is nothing more than a behavioral demonstration of another reality. I see what God decided. He revealed what are the behaviors that you have to do, which take into recognition that there's a spiritual universe. You know, it's like living on top of a roof, and all of a sudden your parents tell you never go toward the edge, and you don't know why. Now the answer, obviously, because you go toward the edge, you're going to fall over. All you know is the behavior it is to avoid the roof at this point. You see, a mitzvah is really an act that is in concert with spiritual reality and Olam Haba, the future world. Except God has not told us the meaning of it now. However, you can find out in many ways there is an aspect of Judaism that does talk about this, and that is Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the understanding of the unexplained or mystical aspects of Judaism. So Kabbalah is a very important limud at a certain time after you've acquired a certain database. But that's the essence of Judaism. Know that there's another reality besides the physical. I mean, I have whole lectures on this and so on, but that's really what it is. And that's what a mitzvah is.
But this other reality, how would you relate that to the mitzvah? Because you have to explain and teach what is this other reality about? Why would anyone be interested in it? And how do the mitzvah? Okay, so how did the mitzvahs get you to be in that reality and enjoy it in the end? Right?
That's Hashkafa. There are different realities. What's very interesting what God created. There's the reality of God Himself. Then He created a second reality called the neshama, and that's the greatest reality outside of Him. Then God created a third reality called Ruchnius, or the spiritual universes. Right? There's an entire universe besides ours that is called spiritual, you see, which itself is really in many ways different than the soul. The soul exists in a reality called the divine, and the proper place for the divine or the soul is Olam Haba, the future world. The world of the angels, which is Ruchnius, that's different reality. Then He created the reality called the physical. What God wants you to do is two things. One, He creates a physical universe, and He wants you to figure out that He is the major principle of the physical universe, even though He doesn't appear to you. And then the result of that is that He will re-enter the physical universe, and then the whole physical universe is retransformed into the higher reality. What He wants is us to change the physical reality, and the Ramchal calls it zikuch, to purify the physical, where it actually becomes spiritual. And then the spiritual reality goes higher, and it becomes divine, which is Olam Haba, and so on. So what God wants is two things. You need to recognize and behave in accordance with a higher reality. And the second thing is, as a result of that, He will come down, the Ein Sof, God, and change the physical reality into a higher reality, step by step, until after a certain time, the reality that what was started out as physical now becomes Olam Haba. It becomes and that reality is divine. It's not even spiritual. It's much higher than the spiritual reality.
So, but I'm going to ask you a very provocative question. Okay, why would anyone be interested in that?
Because that's the meaning of your existence.
And what do you feel? I mean, what is it? Obviously,
if I tell you that for this reason you exist, wouldn't you be interested? I mean, if a guy walks over to you and says, "What do I have to eat for?" I said, "Well, if you don't eat, you're going to die. Are you interested in living or not?" Right? So the same thing. But what we do is we live even though we don't know about God, and that's only temporary. The only real reality where we actually live eternally is if we do the mitzvahs or other ideas and so on. So what's a guy going to say? Well, I'm not interested. Okay.
Well, no, but right. But I'm saying, what is someone going to feel? And you're going to motivate people based on the meaning it's going to give to somebody, or the sense of purpose.
If you do it the right way, you will have enormous pleasure. Because when a person lives a meaningful life that he believes in, that it's real, then he derives a tremendous amount of satisfaction. And it's more than that. When you do the mitzvahs, when you learn about the Torah and Hashkafa, you feel different. You can feel the reality of Ruchnius, because that's the gift that God gives us. When we learn Torah, we feel different, you see. And that's because something happens to our neshama. So it's not only cognitive, it's experiential. But that's why, look, a guy can say, I don't care about it existing eternally. I don't care about being connected to God. Don't bother me. Fine. Then that's his choice. But if a guy realizes this is the entire condition for eternal existence, why would a guy say that? And not only, like I say, but experientially, you feel different.
So that's what I'm saying. So the point is that it will catapult you to a higher and much better existence, a sense of contentment and purpose and meaning.
Exactly.
So now, so you're saying that without this study of these deeper levels, this is what you're going to miss out on. I mean, you could go to school for you should go for 50 years, and you won't get this.
Right. Exactly.
How do you get this? So
that's why.
What do you need to teach to get this?
Okay, so that's why the Ramchal wrote 3 types of book, which is interesting. He wrote what's called the Maimah HaChokhmah. Well, Maimah HaChokhmah, anyway, and that is what to learn. Then he wrote, okay, I know what to learn, but how do I achieve this greatness of being, which is the Avodah? So he wrote the Metzilas Yesharim. This is the Avodah, which means this is the steps that I must take to become a tzaddik, to become a person that loves God, hears God, etc.
So tell us about Metzilas Yesharim. What's it all about? What's the objective? And how do you teach this in schools? And should it be brought into the educational system? The teaching of
Metzilas Yesharim is different than any Mussar sefer ever written. It's called Mussar, right? And what Mussar is behavioral commitment. What do you do behaviorally? So the Chokhmah of Torah is cognitive. It's the mind. But what about the behavior and my feelings, emotions, and so on? So that's the study of Mussar. Now, when you look at Mussar, my behavior, right? Mussar has many levels. So what the Metzilas Yesharim did, what Ramchal did, is very interesting. He wrote a sefer not based on an individual characteristic. No, he wrote a sefer based on the different levels of characteristics and what is each characteristic at that level. For instance, there are levels called Noki, cleanliness, and there's Doras and so on. Each level means you behave differently toward a string of different behaviors. So he actually wrote a guide. That's why Metzilas Yesharim is one of the greatest Mussar ever written, because it's not about individual midas. It's about levels of achievement, right? Of change, of avodah.
So what kind of change?
Classic guide.
How does Metzilas Yesharim and the teaching of the Ramchal in general, how does it change the person? How does it transform you? And how should it be taught? And who should it be taught to?
Well,
obviously
that's why
children. And how do you bring it to a practical level?
Because the Ramchal wrote the first chapter of that sefer, right? Before he even starts about how to do the avodah, is what's called Microbiome Medicine. What is the obligation? That's the rationale. That's Hashkafa. The Ramchal realized, and he knew, and that's why he did, you're not going to engage in this type of, endeavor unless you have a rationale. The rationale is Hashkafa. This is what the mission is of each Jew, right? Is to imbibe God into their personality. Once you believe that and understand that this has to be the rationale, then you can now engage in doing what he calls the avodah, or the actual service, the behavior, and so on. That's why he did that. But the beauty of Metzilas Yesharim is that it's an actual guidebook. But first they had to defend the rationale. Why bother? And that's what he did.
The idea of Metzilas Yesharim is to change your behavior, your qualities, your midot, in other words, not to be angry, to have more compassion,
More
to be
than
more
that,
empathetic.
it's more than Tikkun Hamidus.
So what
it's
is it?
also the dvekus. Dvekus is not a
Yeah, but-
mida,
Yeah, but
change, not get
but
angry.
you get to the attachment of God, to Hashem, by
But
being
that's part
like
of the
him,
behavior.
by being like him.
But that's part of the behavior. It's
Okay,
not a
so-
mida. This is not tikkun amidas.
So
How
what
to
is
fear
midos?
God.
What is midos? If not, what having compassion, rachamim, is, for an example, that's a midah.
Right.
If someone gets
Yeah,
an
so if
anger,
you broaden the definition of mida, then you could include love, fear, not getting angry, developing chesed. All these are midas, true. But you have to have a rationale. You have to have a motive. Why would anybody do that?
well,
And the answer is
the
Hashkafa.
motive is I'm saying the motive ultimately is that you become like Hashem. That's the motive, that you could enter into a higher state.
No, that's not a motive. The
What is
motive
the
is
motive?
because you want to live eternally and you want to have zakah to God. The motive of all of this is to be attached to God, not to become like Hashem. To be
Well,
attached to God.
I mean, to attach. That's what I meant. To be attached to God, but still, the practical. There's many facets to the Ramchal, but look, Tikkun Hamidos is certainly a part of it.
Exactly, it is.
And do you think
Right.
that this is something that is passed over, that is not focused on? What aspects of Judaism and Torah is not being focused on, not being taught, and what should be taught and why? And
Well, Muster used to be more taught, and it's not. There's no
Now,
real teaching.
what do you
Mussar.
mean? What do you mean by Musa? What do you mean by
Well,
that?
Musa is the Messiah Hisham. What am I supposed to do behaviorally? Not what am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to do behaviorally? And that is not really taught. It used to be taught.
Now, what do you mean by that? Behaviorally.
Well, behaviorally is first of all, there's the midas, right? How do I act? How do I act?
Wow! I can't believe the hour is up already. Rabbi Kessin, we have to have you again. We're just beginning.
Right?
We're just beginning. Wow! I
Right.
can't believe the hour's up. Well, we'll have you back. We'll talk more.
Okay.
At some point, Rabbi Kessin, I want to bring
That was a paid advertisement.
Jewish educators on principles, and let's we'll get into a dialogue for real practical
Okay.
applications of what you're saying, because I think
Right.
it's
Oh, there's so
principles
much
have to hear
more.
this.
Right.
Of course, we could have hours.
Right.
Thank you all for listening, Rabbi Kessin. Thank you so
Thank
much
you for
being
having me on. Thank you
And
for having me on.
we'll talk about